What's up guys, Ronaldo here, and today we are going to compare Constance with Dolores. Who comes out on top? Who is the better attack buffer out of these two? And for that we are going to use this set right here. I'm gonna copy the setup on both units so it's a fair fight. As you can see, it's basically just as much attack stacked as possible. And also what we're going to do here is, if we take a look here, I have a tier list here, and unfortunately there is only one tier list with Constance in it, and this one does only have legendaries. So we take a picture of Leia for our Dolores, and what we're going to do is that if, for example, Constance is better at AMR, she gets a point, while Dolores may be better at Gear A1, then she gets a point, and see who comes out on top of these two. And this is just a way to track the progress out of these two, who really is the better unit. But this isn't the main point. Don't get distracted by this Leia picture. This is supposed to be Dolores. And the first thing that we want to do is check how much attack bonus do these units give. Who gives more attack, Dolores or is it Constance? Because as we can see here, Constance has the lower multiplier on her ultimate as a Dolores has. Constance has 45% while Dolores has 60% inspiration overall. But Dolores has the lower base stats, as we can see. So who comes out on top in the end in terms of damage buffing? Now for that I'm going to take Dolores out of her Infernal faction so she doesn't get a buff, because otherwise it would be biased towards Constance, because as we can see, otherwise our Constance would get a buff from a legendary lord while Dolores would only get a buff from our Infernal lord, which wouldn't be fair. This way we can avoid any outside factors of this comparison. So we take Dolores here for the test, and we will take Constance without the Watcher buff as well for her test. So for the test we're going to use a Zilla2 and see how much damage her auto hits deal in her ultimate during the Dolores or Constance buff. So we're gonna place them down real quick and just activate their ultimates and see how much damage it does. As you can see, she has the inspiration buff, she will always have it. And we have 374,000, right? Yeah, 374,690. Okay, so this is the Dolores damage. Now let's get into the Constance. I'm gonna go and swap the gear real quick. I'll be back. Alright, we swapped the gear. We put the Constance down into the Infernal faction so she doesn't get the Watcher bonus. And that would influence the comparison. And we do the same here again. We place down our Zilla2. This time we place down our Constance with her. Put down our Laurel and see how well our Zilla2 hits. 339,000. Did I see this right? Yes, 339,000. So quite a significant difference between the 360,000 to the 330,000. Which is actually quite a bit disappointing, not gonna lie, since Constance is that legendary unit, is that legendary buffer. She is not able to keep up with the 60% inspiration of Dolores, and in terms of damage buff gets outmatched from our Dolores, which means the first point goes to Dolores. So this is Dolores, 1 point for her. Then we have some other criteria, and we have all the content that we want to go through and compare them through all the content, right? So then we have some other stuff to take a look at, and that is the ultimate cost. As we can see, it's 900 and 500 start, just like Dolores has 900 and 400 starting rage, but we have a duration of 22 seconds and 22 seconds cooldown. For Constance we have a duration of 20 seconds and 20-second cooldown, so it's pretty similar in that aspect. And the main difference though is going to be the rage. As we can see, Constance gets 3% rage back whenever she gets hit, So against the guild boss that's nice, and against other stuff that's also nice. But the big thing here that we should not forget is the thing that I'm gonna do right now. When graceful dancing ends, increases the chance of increasing rage by 80%, which means there is a 80% chance of Dolores increasing her own rage by 300 after the end of graceful dancing, already getting back her basic starting rage and having an insane amount of rage from that, which is extremely reliable and can be just used to rerun and over again, no matter the run. If you're against some run where you don't take damage, you always get value out of this 80%. While on the other hand, out of the Constance rage regen, the 3% rage regen is not nearly as good as the Dolores rage regen, and is more situational, since you don't always get hit and you don't always want to place your healer to get hit. For example, in gear raid 1 you wouldn't want her to get hit simply because she wouldn't be able to survive. Which leads us to give another point to Dolores. This point though not for the attack buff, but this point goes to her for the ultimate uptime for the rage regen and her uptime. Her uptime is higher than Constance's uptime is. Now the next points that we're going to give is the healing, and that goes to Constance. And then another point that we could give to Constance is the blocking aspect. She is able to block units. Now this is kinda half of a point, not gonna lie. We're gonna be generous here and give Constance a full point for that, for the fact that she is able to block units, which leads us to a 2-point tie. But this tie isn't finished yet, because we have one major aspect as well that we didn't consider yet in terms of the stats and the stuff they provide, and that is the cost to use them. Dolores only have 5 cost, which gives her a 3-to-2 advantage, and Dolores, while she only leads 3-to-2 at the moment from in terms of stats, you will see the 3 points that she got are way more valuable than the 2 points that Constance got when we go through the different pieces of content. So in terms of guild boss, as we already saw, Dolores is on top over Constance. Then we also have guild versus guild, and I can show you guys real quick what I did here with Constance, and that is right here. So with Constance you actually can go and place her here. This way you can block more units. She will be able to heal all of your units, so not only will you get more blocks, you can also get rid of a healer, and therefore you can improve your defense setup for the guild versus guild. And due to that, Constance is actually better in guild versus guild than Dolores, simply because you don't really have space for a Dolores, which gives Constance the edge here and giving her a point back to climb back closer to Dolores. Then we have the gear raid 1, and in gear raid 1 the point goes to no one else but Dolores, simply because at stage 20 and above you won't be able to place your defender up here in front. Therefore you have to place him back here, and Constance will only be able to buff 1 unit with her ultimate, making her less viable than a platform unit like Dolores. On top of that, Constance costs more than Dolores, so it takes more time to deploy her. I tried both. Like, I tried to use a Constance. I tried to use her in the middle, so she uses gets 2 buffs on 2 fighters and make these fighters more viable. But in the end, it's more reliable to go and just have mages. The mages are just so much stronger than the fighters in that aspect, the Comet or Vierna, that it doesn't even make sense to go here and place the Constance down. That doesn't mean Constance is weak. Constance has its place here. If you don't have Dolores, Constance will everywhere be your substitute for Dolores, where the Dolores will get the point here in the system. But for now, Dolores gets the point here for gear raid 1. Then in gear raid 2 it's actually quite interesting, cause you can use Constance in multiple ways here. Constance fulfills multiple roles here. And that is that she will not only be healing your team, she will buff your team, and she will block these guys that come in. If we take a look here, these are the sprinters, right? So these guys that sprint it down, you can block with Constance, and then you can use her to heal. You can use her to buff your damage as well. And depending on the type of strategy you use, Constance can be even better than Dolores, or at least as good as Dolores. But the buff of Dolores, the full damage buff of Dolores, is of course higher. The cost of Dolores is lower. And if you go for a combat strat, where you don't really use any defenders, you just get rid of your defenders immediately and just use combat to rinse your enemies, Dolores will be better because she has the higher attack buff, which makes it hard to rank this gear rate 2, but because of that, depending on your strat and depending on the type of units that you got, Constance can actually fulfill multiple roles, while Dolores only fulfills one role, but she fulfills that role better. This way we have a tie here at gear rate 2, giving both of them 1 point here for gear rate 2. Then in gear rate 3 I used both of them again for gear rate 3, 20 and 21. And I really needed both of them. Yeah, I needed both of them, but I didn't really need the Constance buff that much. And Constance has multiple roles here, just like in gear rate 2, while Dolores only has one role. And Constance also has a better placement here than Dolores, because you can place her on one of the ground tiles. While these platform tiles are all very contested, Constance can be used at a platform. She can be used as a tank in front to absorb these nukes here, abyssal horrors. She can heal, and she does the attack boost. And yet, even though she gives so much different stuff to your team, I will still give that point to Dolores. So how come, you may ask? Well, first of all, the damage check here is higher than in gear rate 2, so the damage matters more than in gear rate 2. And this is more about another unit than Dolores or Constance in gear rate 3. Because the difference maker for this is going to be, I'll show you guys, this girl right here, Laurel. For the guys that saw my gear rate 21 lineup, I can show you guys how I did it basically. I didn't gear anyone here, but I can still show you how I did it. So the lineup works like this, right? You use your 1 DPS cost generator, and then your second DPS will be on the back. Your Dolores will be here, and then Laurel will come in and give these two their ultimates instantly. And Laurel will do this over and over again in this run. And this is the difference maker about this fight here. This is mainly the difference maker between Constance and Dolores. It's a tight one, and this though makes it that your second DPS, if you want to buff both of your DPS, as you can see, Silas and Idril get buffed. This way Idril has to be placed at the back and Dolores at the front, which makes Idril not be able to hit here, which makes you actually need a defender like that if you want to buff both of them. While on the other hand, if you use Constance, you can easily buff both of these platform units up here, or you can even go and place your Constance differently. You can place your Constance like this as well. Or if you want to do the same strategy as I did with my team before, just with a Constance instead of Dolores, you will run into a big problem. And I'll show you guys real quick what the problem is. So we place our cost generator just randomly here, just to showcase you guys what the problem will be. We place our Idril. Place our Constance. Now we place our damage dealer here and we pop our Constance, right? She doesn't have any gear, so it doesn't really matter. But this, as you can see, is a bit of a problem, cause now not only did our cost generator die, because Constance had to be in the back, we also got our ultimates off later, because Constance is higher cost. So this is a bit of a problem. It's mainly the fact that Laurel is easier to use when you use low cost unit, and the fight is quite fast paced overall. As you can see, I even use a cost generator, even though I have such low cost units in the fight and 5 cost unit with Dolores. So the main point is Laurel and the 5 cost of Dolores that will actually push Dolores above Constance for gear rate 3. Now I went over gear rate 3 for a bit of a longer time because I felt like it's a tight one between these two in gear rate 3, because Constance does a lot for you in gear rate 3, and it has to be explained why Dolores is actually more valuable. And here in artifact material rate, this is a clear dub for Constance, of course, simply because you don't really have platform unit space. You don't have space for platform units. Constance is really good for gear rate, artifact material rate. I ranked her as well, especially for people that aren't at stage 18 yet and are in the early game. Constance is amazing to get to artifact material rate stage 18, simply because you won't have that many units built, you won't have that many fighters built, so it's fine to just take a buffer instead of a fighter, and Constance does amazing there. Then in terms of the resource rates, we also get a point for Constance, simply because Constance is able to defend enemies instead of just buffing. And in the resource rates, you have enough time to get every deployment out and the cost doesn't matter that much. Campaign, also Constance, simply because she can heal, she can block. And these are two things that I lacked on a lot in the early game. And Dolores, I got at the beginning of the game, and I didn't use her for a long time. I was like, why is Dolores so hyped, so insanely hyped and everything? Why is everyone valuing Dolores so much? This is basically the reason for Dolores being hyped that much is because of the end game, because of the resistances, right? And she doesn't really heal like Constance, she doesn't really block like Constance, so Constance gets a lot of value for the campaign, whereas Dolores gets less value. In the Void Rift, Dolores over Constance, because simply the cost of Dolores is lower than Constance, while against Toreador you don't really have platform units, but overall I think Dolores is more valuable simply because she has such a low cost and she has the higher buff, and it really matters to get through this defense, and she has the better rage regen as well, and overall that's a bit for Dolores. Now this is extremely tight, and it's not only tight, it's also biased towards Constance. And if we want to be fair, we gotta add some rows above real quick, because I want to do some adjustments to this list and explain you exactly why this list isn't perfectly fine at the moment and why we have to do these adjustments. So to keep it fair, we have to take a look at the value of the content. So resource rate, Constance got a whole point for resource rate, but resource rate is early game and it's not that valuable. You can easily do it without that many units, right? On top of that, campaign is also early game and can be done with many units, and in the end game, by the end game, when campaign gets hard, you have enough good units to usually do campaign anyways. Therefore, this should also only get a half of a point, just like the resource rates should only get half of a point, which in the end will take 1 point away from Constance. Then Guild Boss is at the moment the biggest late game thing in the game and will give you 2 points and not just 1. Then we also didn't go over one thing, and that is Arena. And in Arena, guys, I don't know why I'm platinum. It's because of beginning of the season, don't worry guys. In Arena, Dolores hard wins against Constance simply because of the 5 cost is so broken for the arena, because the arena battles are so fast paced. Dolores is so broken for arena. And now that we included actually some valuations and not just a simple basic point system, we actually can see the difference between Constance and Dolores more clearly, right? We gave us some late game valuation, and with this valuation we can clearly see that unfortunately, even though Constance is the 5-star version of Dolores, Dolores is the 6-star version of Constance. Simply put, it's a bit sad that Constance gets outmatched of Dolores, but this just shows how extremely strong Dolores really is, and why she is the best unit in the game. So this doesn't take away much from Constance, guys. If you have Constance, don't be disappointed. I use her in a lot of content ever since I got her. I'm really happy that I got her. And if you don't have Dolores, even better if you have Constance, because she will do the job that Dolores does for most of the content really well, will help you a lot. It's just that in the end game, when it's about the smallest margins, Constance gets edged out by Dolores. Dolores edges out Constance, and Dolores therefore is the winner of this duel, is the winner of this 1v1. Dolores is the GOAT. Other than that, let me know your opinion about this. What do you think about Dolores? What do you think about Constance? And other than that, I'm Ronaldo, and I'm out. Peace!